Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I have the clerk please call the roll.
Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
Treasurer Horning?
Here.
Clerk Chopu? Here. Trustee Colliane?
Here.
Trustee Germain?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Petrucci?
Here. Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support. Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 5 is call to the public. Anybody at call to the public this evening? Being nobody at call to the public, we'll move on to item number 6, which is approval of our consent agenda.
So moved. Support.
Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Petrucci. Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 7. We have 3 items this evening. First is a update on our Safer Roads Plan, and DPW Director Bob West will give us that report.
Thank you. I'm happy to report that the planned projects as part of the Safer Roads Plan have been completed as of this past Monday, with the striping of the village area along Hartland Road and the installation of the bumper blocks as well. What I've developed here is basically an executive summary highlighting the expenses of the road millage. Now, we do have a few minor outstanding invoices totaling less than $6,000. So, and this executive summary does include projections for the remainder of the road millage, and that is for future maintenance of the gravel roads, including a limestone cap, as well as pavement preservation, including crack sealing and or seal coating as needed. However, in the middle column, or the left-hand side of the figures, and highlighted in red, you will see the original allocation as part of the Safer Roads Plan. And to the right of that, you will see the actual cost of the invoices that we have received for these projects. Essentially, what we have is we're projecting at the end of this year, we will have approximately $3.13 million remaining, or as far as the ledger balance. However, we do project approximately $1.75 million in the remainder of the road millage for this pavement preservation and gravel road limestone cap as described. If those costs are, or I should rephrase that, these costs are factored at today's unit pricing. We've compounded it with inflation. However, these are projections, and I do want to add caution that the true cost savings will not be recognized until the end of the road millage. However, if these costs remain as projected, it will essentially, at the end of the year 2024, will leave a balance of $1.38 million from the original Safer Roads Plan allocation. Below that, I've itemized the road plan and the actual costs, as well as the future projected cost for each road project that we have basically tackled as far as the Safer Roads Plan. And it kind of highlights the key items here, ending up with the same balances. And with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions regarding this information.
Is this the right time to be discussing what, if those are the projected, what should be done with those?
I think what we talked about, at least at the admin meeting, was to, like, for 2 or 3 years, and then have that discussion.
That's fine. I just want to make sure whether
if we're going to go forward with another one, do we tie this? I think James is that we spoke about tie this money into it, maybe other projects.
Yeah, the pending strategic plan will probably include some
work session late next year to start to talk about when do we decide that.
Are we doing any sidewalks?
The sidewalks were not part of the Safer Roads
Yes, I
plan allocation, but yes, we do have some on the docket for 2018, and there were some completed in the village area as part of the village improvements, but funded not out of the Safer Roads plan allocations.
To clear the Hartland Road sidewalk, the board has not yet decided whether you want to do that next year or not. We're ready to do it, and I expect we'll have a work session on that in the next month for your direction on that.
That was the one we had engineered?
It's engineered and ready to hit the streets.
James, can you scroll on down a little bit?
Yeah.
I have a question about the chloride expenses on the gravel roads.
Yes.
Have we been able to do 4 applications per year for the last 3 years? Or is that more weather dependent?
Every year we've applied for applications. However, depending on the moisture content of the gravel roads on the 4th application, generally we apply at a rate that the Livingston County Road Commission recommends, which has historically been a lot less, up to 60% less than a 4,000 gallon per mile rate, which is a standard application.
So it's been a light 4th application. Some years, do we even do a 4th application?
We've always done
the
it,
one, but very light.
but very lightly. The moisture content in there, if we apply a higher rate, it simply runs off the surface and will not be absorbed into the roadbed. So that's always been based on the Road Commission recommendation, but we have not. We have always done a 4th application since the initiation of the road millage plan. That's why the cost may seem a little lower. However, we always project based on a full application, or I should say, we have budgeted and therefore I projected for future maintenance as full application amount.
So on this breakdown of expenses, a couple places we have a 0 that was in the original, but yet we spent some of the money for other activities road related. Is that true?
That is correct. There was, just to draw attention to a few of them, the village streetscape plan, there was additional funding for the additional parking in that area, the striping and the bumper blocks. That was not part of the Livingston County Road Commission's scope of work. I don't know if you remember or recall, but the board approved the Bullard Road north of Reed Road, or I'm sorry, south of Reed Road, where there were trees and drainage improvements done, as well as a gravel application. That was not originally part of it. But what this has done is the road millage plan has allowed us to leverage these funds when the road commission comes to us with a cost-sharing opportunity.
It's also part semantics too, because the Safer Roads plan did anticipate that we would make some investment in the village drain, and of course the Hartland Road project is included in that. That number, although it went higher than we expected it to, that number closer to 250,000 was included in these lump sum numbers that you see for road maintenance. So it was anticipated. We didn't necessarily parse it that way for this purpose. So there was a plan to spend some money on that. It just got harder to track.
Okay. So this was a $9 million millage over a 10-year period?
That is correct. The original projections were.
And we spent the money in 3 years?
Let
me rephrase that. We completed the projects that were identified in the Safer Roads plan in the 3-year period.
That's a correct statement.
And we did additional work that was not originally anticipated, but we were able to fund from this
yes.
account?
Certain portions, as Manager Wickman had indicated, we had planned for these, and for the sake of argument, the Road Commission broke them down into separate categories. We knew the village drain was part of a Hartland Road project, but they did not invoice us the same way.
And
We won't know the final cost until the end of the maintenance period. But right now, you're projecting about a $1.3 million surplus.
Based on today's figures with a linear inflation and today's unit price costs, ultimately we've historically been somewhat conservative, even with our original plan. We were fortunate where the Livingston County Road Commission has been successful in negotiating lower asphalt prices and lower gravel prices due to county-wide projects, and we've been essentially able to share that purchasing power, if you will.
One more question. Just to clarify, I believe there's a typo, James, if you go back up higher.
I do have a typo in the year.
Okay,
It should
so
be
there's 24.
2024 instead of 2014. I apologize.
All right, I think this is a really good executive summary.
Thank you very much.
If I may just add to what you were saying, we did bond for these projects, borrowed to do all the projects now, and then the millage revenue over the 10 years will go to pay back those bonds. That's why the savings we won't see till the end. What we didn't necessarily plug into this cash flow is that depending on where that savings hit it, we may even be able to pay off some bonds early, save some additional interest costs, and that would end up being to our benefit in the end. So that's another thing we'll keep an eye on.
Any other questions? Thank you for a nice report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item number 7B, we're going to need a resolution for the Ord Valley Road SAD Deficit Elimination Plan. Manager Wickman, you want to give the board just a quick update what this is about?
Thank you, Supervisor Fountain. I'll try to describe it without disparaging accountants. But this is an accountant issue, and it's governmental accounting principles. I won't fault that. Because we didn't borrow money to do the project, the way that the interfund loan for the cash flow in the project from our available funds has to be booked, it shows a deficit in the fund. If we had borrowed money to do the project, there wouldn't be a deficit in the fund. Because there's a deficit on the balance sheet, we have to report back to the Department of Treasury a plan to eliminate that deficit. Our plan to eliminate that deficit is to see the special assessment district through, pay back the interfund loan, and it's over. So this is a formality.
So this was just a requirement based on the audit. We need to show a resolution how it's going to be paid for.
Yes. Because the fund has a deficit on paper, we have to give them a plan that says we'll eliminate that deficit.
So if there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion for the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Read it. Read it.
All right.
Who
Someone say it.
asked? Let's take. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Trying to get to it. Okay, motion to approve the resolution of the deficit elimination plan. That's all it says.
Second.
Well, a friendly amendment would be for fund number 357 for the Ord Valley Special Assessment Fund for the year ended March 31st, 2017.
I will accept that.
You'll accept that
Yeah,
amendment
it's a
to
little
it?
small. I don't
And
know what
support?
I'm doing.
Is there any discussion?
Oops.
Being none, I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Germain?
Yes.
Trustee Petrucci? Yes. Supervisor Fountain?
Yes.
Clerk Chofiu? Yes. Trustee Collier?
Yes.
Treasurer Horning?
Yes.
Thank you. And item number 7C is our financial report, second quarter update. Manager Wickman.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just to review again, we provide these financial reports to the board and to administration on a monthly basis to see how our actual expenditures are compared to the budget. We've done that as long as I've been here and longer. We really haven't done anything with it much beyond that because, frankly, we spend within budget. Everything is hunky-dory, and we move on. But I've tried to be more intentional about that recently and been reporting these to you in our board work sessions, and the board suggested that maybe on a quarterly basis we can do a quick public report on those financial reports, and that's what we're here to do tonight. This is for the end of the second quarter ending September 30th of this year. Our fiscal year begins on April 1st, and so I'm not going to go through in detail on it. What I've done is I've kind of marked up a version of the financial report that you have and made some highlights of some things just as by way of orienting you to the types of things that we as administrators are looking at to make sure that we're performing as expected. So, one highlight is for the total revenues, which is the first section here, and at the 6-month point, 50% through the year, revenues are showing to be at 42%. That's not cause for alarm because our revenues are very cyclical, because tax collection, the big tax collection season, is not yet here, and that's obviously where we collect a large portion of our revenues, and so that over time will stabilize, and otherwise for this time of year, that's to be expected. Other things that we look at are, we'll look through individual line items and we can see, for instance, that membership and dues line item is at 73% for the year. So that's the kind of thing that might catch our attention. We'll look at that. But for something like membership and dues, that's easy to follow because a lot of those dues come due once a year, and a number of them have already been paid for the year and they're done, so that's not cause for alarm, but we just like to confirm those things. But regardless of that, that department overall budget is still at 50% for the year where it should be, so that's performing well. Other highlights that I think there's a couple more of these that I've highlighted that we kind of look for. The total general fund expenditures for the year to date is at 45%. While our revenues are very cyclical, most of our general fund expenditures are not. They're fairly consistent through the year, so we consider that we're under budget at this point in the year, and that, of course, is a good thing. And then we have a lot of the other funds which are quite routine and don't have too many things exciting. The last thing that I highlighted on here, just to again show you what we're looking at, is like the water system fund at the halfway point of the year is that the revenues are at 64%. That is to be expected because, of course, in the summertime there's a lot more water use, and this year was particularly high, particularly in the last 3 months of the quarter. We had a number of folks who had high water bills due to the dry weather, irrigation, and whatnot. And then at the halfway point for the water fund, we're at less than 33% of spending. Some of that can be cyclical because of projects, but generally, as we've seen the last couple of years since taking the operation in-house, that budget has performed very well. And then the last thing I think I was going to highlight was on the sewer fund side, where we're at, and this is another thing that kind of highlight an anomaly. We did sell some property from the sewer fund earlier this year, and that revenue of $1.1 million shows up and just throws the budget out of whack. So it looks like we're 91% of the year of our revenue is already in. Well, we have to look at that a little bit closer, kind of back that out and make sure that our other revenues are on track, and that is the case. And then as we look at the total expenditures on the sewer side, we're at 37% of budget through the halfway point, and that seems to be performing well. So that's just a couple of things. I mean, you can find that consistently throughout the budget. That's why these are fairly boring. That we are performing as expected and are under budget in most all funds. So happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Keep it boring.
we like it boring.
I have a question. When is the next time the Boyle model will be revised?
It's a good question. We do that during the budget cycle. Usually probably in the February timeframe, you'll see that in conjunction with the rest of the budget as we look at things. We'll do that update because by that time we'll know if there's any other delinquencies that we need to be watching, that kind of a thing.
And James, just on benefit of those
Yeah.
that may be watching, if you could explain what the Boyle model is.
Yeah, that's the stochastic model that we built with our actuary in order to follow the sewer issues that happened during the recession and the delinquencies that were occurring and the risk that it was putting to our sewer system ability to pay the bonds back. We built that model to make sure that we could put a good plan into place, and so far we've continued to exceed that model every year and outperform it, and we're seeing that all but a couple of things are lining up that we're out of the clear, so to speak. So we just keep that updated to make sure we're performing as expected or better, and we update that every year at budget time.
And that model was so we can pay back the bonds for those infrastructure improvements in the sewer district.
Yes. When the sewer system, we had to find a new treatment source. We were expanding for vacant lands that were going to be developed before the recession, and then those assessments were not being paid at the time of the recession.
Thank you.
I have one more question. This one's for Kathy. Off the top of your head, do you roughly know what the septic receiving station revenues are, or what they're projected to be for this year?
I just sent that to you guys recently, but
It's in the 250,000 range.
that's what we expect to get.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much we have total in there right now. I just sent that report out.
It's north of $1 million, closer to 1.2, I
That's what
think.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Any other questions for our manager? Thank you. Board reports. We are in our first meeting in November. Trustee Kalani,
No report.
Trustee Germain,
I would just like to provide a quick update on the groundwater contamination at the former Hartland 36 gas processing plant. The Merit Energy Company has received approval from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality to initiate a groundwater remediation system. They were projecting to begin operating the system in late October. However, they have failed to get the electricity needed to run the system. DTE is expected to have the power drop complete by the end of the week. So the system should be in operation next week. The reports that their environmental consultant have been providing are pretty complicated, and so in an effort to try to analyze the data on behalf of the landowners, we put together a couple of tables, and just to highlight a couple of these on the screen. The contaminant is sulfolane, if you recall, and it's heavier than water, so it sinks. And so when the investigation first began about 2 years ago, there was very little contamination found in the shallow wells because the contaminated groundwater was down deeper and just wasn't known at that time. So this particular well, MW7 that's on the screen, is what we call a nested well. There's a shallow well near the surface and then a deeper well down close to the confining clay layer. This is a log-metric scale, so you have to keep that in mind if you see how the numbers jump from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000. But the deeper well identified with the red circles toward the top shows a decreasing concentration even before the remediation system has begun, but it's way, way above the cleanup criteria, which is down around 10. It's actually 11, but that's the laboratory limits that they can achieve, and that's in the parts per billion. So there's a lot of contamination in the groundwater in this particular location. If you want to just pick one or another one, James. Okay, this is monitoring well 13. You can see in this particular case, because it's a higher monitoring well number, it was installed at a later date. But the in this case, both the shallow and the deep screened wells have similar concentrations. And this is in the vicinity where the contamination originated, so this is something that would be expected here. But you can see that the trend is already starting to drop. And this is evidence that the remediation technique that was picked, which is bioremediation, is going to be effective because there's already naturally occurring bacteria in the soil and in the groundwater, and they have adapted themselves to use this sulfolane organic chemical as a food source. The reason that the remediation system is expected to be effective in about a 12 to 15 month period is because they're going to be introducing pressurized air into the groundwater. If you think about blowing a straw into the bottom of a water glass, the bubbles that come up is essentially what they're going to be doing in the groundwater table itself. And that increased oxygen concentration will increase the biological action of the naturally occurring bacteria. And we can track how that happens by monitoring the byproducts of the biodegradation. So the MDEQ has approved the work plan. They've got detailed reporting that they have to provide on a quarterly basis at a minimum. But just since startup is so close, they're going to be monitoring it a lot closer in the first couple months. That's part of the due diligence with the startup of a new remediation system. So all the data again is confirmed that there's no contamination outside the original 5-acre parcel, and since the source has been removed by that massive soil excavation that occurred, it's not getting any worse. And with this groundwater remediation system that's been proposed, the site should return back to basically normal. The detection level of the laboratories, as I said, is 11 parts per billion. And with this remediation technique, the bacteria are going to eat and eat and eat until there's no more contamination there. So unlike some other techniques that could have been selected, it may have left quite a bit of residual product, but in this case, as long as there's bacteria, nutrients, and oxygen, they're going to thrive and survive until the food source is gone. So I suspect this will be our last report on this for maybe a year. There's really nothing more to report. The site's being cleaned up, and that's a good thing. So.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. That was good.
Trustee Harper.
No report.
Trustee Petrucci.
Last week, James had sent out a email with regards to Hacker and M59.
Yeah.
And just want to let everybody know that they are doing a traffic count now. Wires are out on the road. So everybody out there and everybody here that wants a light there, drive by there as much as you can. Not only will it help people come off of Hacker Road on left and right turns, but it also slow that traffic down a little bit on M59. So I hope that traffic count will be enough to warrant a light at that intersection. So we'll see.
Thank you. Clerk Schofu.
No report.
Treasurer Horning.
Nothing.
And I have no report this evening. If there's nothing else, we'll take a brief recess and have our manager's report.